How do you make sense out of your Amazon pay-per-click reports and then figure out what you should do next to optimize your spend in 2020? I'll show you how you can use this incredible yet totally free dashboard to make your next steps crystal clear. This thing is jam-packed with insights. It'll become your new best friend. We're getting started right now. Okay, so one of my top priorities for 2020 is to help as many Amazon sellers as I possibly can make sense out of the confusing, to put it lightly, the confusing data in your pay-per-click reports and make it crystal clear what's going on. So in this video, I want to introduce you to this completely free spreadsheet I put together that turns your search term and your targeting reports into a super powerful keyword research tool. So first off, you can grab a copy of this. There's a link in the description box below. Just click on that and you can make a copy of this spreadsheet. And then to populate your data in this spreadsheet, just follow the instructions on the instructions tab here. All you need to do really to get up and running is download either your search term or your targeting reports. You can do both of them if you want, and then just paste them into these blue tabs over here. You only need to get one of them to get started, but you could paste both of them if you wanted to. That's optional. And in case you're wondering what the difference is between those two reports, the search term report shows you data for keywords where you have at least one click, and your targeting report shows you all keywords you're bidding on, including the ones with no clicks at all. We're going to focus on the search term report in this video, but the insights that I show you, they'll also apply to the targeting report. And then up here in the top is where you're going to choose which data you're going to load, either the search term or the targeting report. Okay, so let's jump right into this. So right off the bat, you get an instant visual of how much you're spending on advertising, both in terms of total dollars and the amount per converted unit. And in this case, you invested about $12,000 to generate $33,000 in sales. So you have about $21,400 in net sales remaining after ad spend. And then on a per unit basis, you can see you're spending about $9 per unit on advertising. So that's a pretty decent chunk. This number here is really handy. So when you're doing your books for month's end close, you probably see exactly how much profit you earn per unit before any of your ad spend. And so this is really useful because if you run your pay-per-click reports for the same period, you can take this number here, $9 in this case, and plug it into your unit P&L from your monthly close process to see your true net profit per unit. So let's say you did your monthly close and your unit P&L for all your products, across all your products, showed you, say, a $13 net profit per unit before ad spend. So this spreadsheet is showing you invested $9 per unit. So your ROI on your ad spend is actually going to be, let's see what it comes out to, 13 over 9 minus 1. 44% would be your ROI on your ad spend in that case. So you can kind of think about it like that 13, the 13, it's like from the 13 from your unit P&L, as you can kind of think of that as your payoff. And then the $9 here, you can kind of think of that as your investment. Not terrible, but you'd probably like to get that 44% up a little higher. So that kind of sets the stage for how you look at the rest of this spreadsheet, all right? So also keep in mind what you're looking at here is total. How you're doing totally across the whole board. This might tell one story, but then across the board, it might tell one story, but then when you dig into the individual keywords, they kind of each tell their own unique story about what's going on. But in this situation, thankfully, you cleared about 44% of ROI. So that aggregate 44% figure, that can also come in handy later if you're ever deciding whether or not a certain keyword is worth the investment. If you get in that situation, you need to compare that particular keyword that you're evaluating, compare that keyword's ROI to the opportunity cost of your advertising spend, and your aggregate ROI, the one we just did off to the side here, at 44% across all your keywords, is a pretty reasonable figure to use for your opportunity cost. It's a reflection of what you consider your average or your expected performance to be on any given keyword. In other words, your average keyword. So you can use this figure here, $9 in this case, when you're researching your prospective products that you are considering launching as well. You probably make a unit P&L when you're choosing to source a new product or you're evaluating whether or not to source it. And in that unit P&L, you definitely want to have a line for ad spend in order to size up the true profitability of that product. So the $9 per unit, it would make sense to use in that context. Hopefully in your case, it's much lower than $9. We're using a kind of high number here to help demonstrate a few things. You'll see that a bit later. So one thing to keep in mind with the search term and the targeting reports, the data in those reports, it reflects the data for keywords that both converted and the keywords that didn't convert. So you might be wondering to yourself, understandably, how much did you spend per unit on the keywords, just the keywords that converted? That's what this table over here is for. So this table breaks out all of your KPIs for your converting keywords, the green column, and then all of your KPIs for the non-converters, that's the red column. So you can see how that's affecting, how the non-converters are affecting your total. So over here, your cost per conversion, it would have been $396 if you didn't spend $6,600 on keywords that didn't convert. So that $6,600 is completely wasted spend in this case. But the silver lining there is that excluding any enter keyword dynamics, which there might be some of those, but putting that aside, if you were to just cut your ad spend on all those keywords in the red column that didn't convert, your total cost per conversion, it would be much closer to the $396. So let's see what that would have come out to. 13 divided by 396. And you would have come out to 228%. So at least you know that in terms of ROI, it would be 228%. So at least you know that when things are working how they're supposed to, your advertising ROI is more than 5 times higher, would be more than 5 times higher than it is overall currently. In that case, it would come out to about 228%. But, while that's promising and everything, the reality is that you really did waste $6,600 or 8,000 clicks, right, on keywords that didn't generate any sales at all. And that pulled your cost per conversion from $396 way up to $894. So you got some work to do in this case to either get a reasonable ROI out of that spend, out of the $6,600, or just eliminate it. Now down here in the best versus worst keywords table are all of your KPIs for 4 particularly notable keywords. These are the ones that have the most sales, the most spend, and the ones with the highest and lowest ACOS. And these 4 are sort of in the spotlight because there's a strong likelihood of needing to take action on one or more of these. The one with the most sales, the first green one, maybe you want to increase your spend to milk on that keyword, to milk that keyword's ROI even more. It would be prudent to check if it's ROI first, though, before you did that, of course, since, remember, a high absolute amount of sales doesn't necessarily mean that you're earning those sales at a favorable ROI. In fact, you could be taking a loss on all those sales. So you'll want to check the ROI first before increasing your budget or your bid on this particular keyword. But if your unit P&L for this particular product gives you the same per unit profit figure we were using earlier, the $13, and you already know your ROI we just figured out it would be 230% at $4 in ad spend. Well, then right now, right off the bat, when you see 226 down here per conversion for this keyword, your ROI is going to be north of even that 230% ROI. So thankfully, here the $250 in sales is earning an excellent ROI. So in this case, you'll want to milk that keyword for all it's worth. Now, conversely, if this keyword long, if it wasn't generating a great ROI, then first you'd want to investigate what component was causing the poor ROI, whether that be impressions, click-through rate, or conversion rate, and see if there's any action you can take to improve it. If not, then you'd kind of want to fall back to thinking about ways to just go ahead and reduce or eliminate your ad spend. And we'll get into those mechanics a little bit more a bit later. And that thought process, it really applies to all 4 of these notable keywords highlighted here, or any keyword you're investigating, really. These 4 are front and center just because they're on the extreme ends of sales, spend, and ACOS. So a similar exercise goes for the other notable keywords here in the next few columns. For the highest spend keyword, you'd like for the sales it's generating to be pretty close to the 250 you're getting from the green keyword, long, because after all, you're spending even more than that one, right? You're spending 38 instead of 23 in this case. Thankfully, it's pretty close. The sales for spotless is pretty close to 225. And again, you can glance down at the 420 here and know, hey, that ROI must be close to 230% because we figured that out earlier. So that one's pretty healthy too. Now, notice how I'm kind of superseding all these other KPIs in the middle here. I went from thinking about sales all the way down to cost per conversion. The ones in the middle, they can kind of help throw flags or help you detect potential problems to investigate further. And we're going to go into that concept in a lot more detail later. But at the end of the day, what's the one number that matters the most? If your ROI meets your requirements, then all these other KPIs are going to look good overall too. Okay, notice how I said overall. That's not to say that maybe one of these specific KPIs like CTR, click-through rate, it might be poor, but if your ROI is great, then the other KPIs must be outweighing any poor ones. So you can kind of use ROI as a shortcut diagnosis as to whether or not you have a winner or a losing keyword on your hands. All right, so how about these delicious looking pie charts over here? Kind of makes me want to go eat some candy canes. Anyway, these pies are really useful. So this is telling you that about 72% of your keywords are non-converting. Now, you know that's definitely a problem, right? But on the bright side, that 72% is actually only driving about 56% in ad spend. So at least it's not, proportional. At least it's the 72% of the non-converting keywords. At least they're not driving 72% of the spend, right? Because that would be even worse. So thankfully, the keywords that are converting, they comprise 44% of the spend. So 28% of the converting keywords are comprising 44% of the spend. So, the ones that aren't converting, those got to be cleaned up for sure. Now, if you're more of a visual person, these charts down here, they'll paint the same type of picture for you right away as to, in terms of the effect of the non-converting keywords, what effect those are having on your KPIs. So click-through rate was 0.67 for converting keywords, but the non-converting ones were only 0.51, so that dragged the total click-through rate all the way down to 0.57. So not a drastic drag, actually, but the conversion rate one is much worse. So the converters were 21% conversion rate, but the non-converters, remember we had 8,000 clicks with 0 conversions, so that's dragging the conversion rate way down to 9%, a little over 9%. So that looks like the biggest problem in aggregate here so far. The conversion rate is really sticking out. The clicks are there, but you're ending up with too many clicks that kind of hit a brick wall. Then over here to the right a little bit, you see your traffic funnel, exactly how you would think of it naturally in a funnel. At the top, you see you have about 2.5 million conversions, how that converts into clicks, and then finally how many orders fall out at the bottom, about 1,300 in this case. Now let's dig into the KPIs down a little bit further. Most people talk about their KPIs. Most people talk about them using the traditional ones that are intuitive or easier to communicate with other people. These ones under traditional KPIs. So things like ACOS, click-through rate, conversion rate, cost per click, that type of thing. Now, let's start with ACOS. Let's talk about that for a little bit. It's probably one of the more commonly discussed Amazon pay-per-click metrics. And it's measuring the percentage of your sales that went to ad spend. So it's what you would call in the financial world a margin. Margins are just any cost from your P&L divided by sales. But the thing is, ACOS is actually not the most useful way to measure your ad spend. And why is that? Well, there's really two main reasons that come to mind. Number one is because its margins are not practical. So, and what do I mean by that? Well, look at it like this. If I ask you to tell me how much you're spending in, say, shipping costs or FBA fees as a percent of revenue, that's probably not something that you have top of mind without going to do the calculation, right? But I bet if I ask you how much you're spending on shipping costs per unit, I bet you know that number right off the top of your head. Similarly, if I ask you, how much you pay in FBA fees per unit, you probably know that number like the back of your hand. It's burned into your memory. The per unit economics, they're more practical in daily business use. And then the second reason is that margins can be misleading. So using a margin here, it can lead you astray if it's not being used correctly. It's supposed to be an ACOS is supposed to be used as an indirect metric, not a direct metric. And let me explain sort of what I mean by that. So let's say that the average selling price of all your products is $25, like you see here off to the right, 25. All right. And let's say you use your ACOS of 36%. You use that to forecast profit for a new prospective product. You're using the 36% to forecast your ad spend line. But let's say that product is actually going to sell for 30 instead of 25. Well, that would imply that your ad spend is going to go up for that unit just because the price is higher. Now, does that make sense? No. Ad spend margin, it doesn't vary with price necessarily unless you go increase your budget or your bids when you raise your price as well. So Amazon pay-per-click doesn't use your price to make bids, right? It doesn't know anything about your price per se. It uses your budget and your bids to make bids. In other words, if you think about it like this, if you go into one of your listings and you raise your price by 20%, think about it. Does your ad spend automatically go up by 20% too? No, of course not. That's why ACOS, it really should only be used as an indirect metric, not a direct metric to forecast or estimate anything. Think of it like an after-the-fact calculation. So instead of thinking about your ACOS being 36%, it's more useful to think about your cost per conversion being $8.94. Your cost per conversion being $8.94 is a much more useful figure because it represents your average ad spend per converted unit. And then you can apply that figure to your unit P&L for an existing product, or you could use it in a unit P&L for a prospective product, as I mentioned earlier. And now that you're thinking in terms of $8.94 per converted unit instead of ACOS of 36%, it actually opens up the door to seeing exactly how you ended up at $8.94. So consider this. If I ask you to decompose the 36% into its component parts, what would you do? If I was like, so your ACOS is 36%, what KPI levers can you possibly pull to get that number down? Your best answer to that question is probably going to be, well, the components are just ad spend divided by sales. So I need to either get my ad spend down or my sales up. But that's kind of like a doctor telling a patient he needs to lose weight by losing weight. You want a treatment plan. You want to know what's causing you to gain weight so you can reverse those contributing factors. Maybe you find out it's nutrition and exercise, so you come up with a plan to eat better and go to the gym, right? So the same thing applies here. If you start at your cost per conversion of $8.94, now it's not only possible, but it's practical to break down and really see the individual drivers behind why you're ending up at $8.94. So here's exactly how you do that. How did you end up at $8.94? Well, it's because you're spending $4.76 to get 1,000 impressions. You need 176 impressions to generate one click. You need 10.7 clicks to generate one conversion. And finally, you need one conversion to generate one unit, which just means your average order contains one unit. So multiply all those together, divide by 1,000. That's exactly how you get to $8.94, down to the penny. It's sort of the etymology or the provenance of your cost per conversion, if you will, to get really nerdy. By the way, you might be wondering, why did he divide by 1,000 at the end there? Well, what that basically does is converts the CPM in the first box into a cost per impression. That's all. That's all it does. It's more useful in the first step to think in terms of CPM because the scale, is something that we're used to as humans, especially in the ad world. So, consider the alternative. You could have used cost per impression in the first step instead if you wanted to, but then it would end up being 0.476 cents. So not even a full cent, not even a half a cent. So as humans, we don't have a good feel for numbers at this small of a scale. So that's why we're using CPM here. Anyway, you might have also noticed how this way of thinking, it's also more congruent with the funnel that we just looked at, right? The traffic flow. So you can see here you had 2.5 million impressions at a 0.57% click-through rate, right? And that led to about 14,000 clicks. You had a 9.4% conversion rate. That led to 1,300 orders. So that funnel up there, it follows the same logical flow as the cost per conversion decomposition that ends up with $8.94 in cost per converting unit. So it's like these metrics in this row here, it's like they're talking to each other to arrive at the final answer. And you can't do that with the traditional KPIs down here. So now that you've got your KPIs arranged in this manner, all of a sudden, it's really useful for diagnosing issues and taking action. The fact that your cost per conversion is the product of all these ratios gives you some really nice properties. Namely, that these four ratios have a direct relationship with the number that matters the most, the cost per conversion. For example, if you bring your impressions per click down by 20%, guess what happens to your cost per conversion? It goes down by 20%. If you bring your clicks per conversion down by 20%, your cost per conversion, it goes down by 20%. Then if you did both of those, imagine you brought both of them down by 20%, well then your cost per conversion would go down by, let's figure out what that would be. It'd be 0.8 times 0.8 minus 1, 36%. It would go down by 36%. So you can think of these ratios as like levers that you can pull. You can examine them and pull them to directly affect your end goal of minimizing your cost per conversion. Now you can always fall back to the traditional KPIs down here if you prefer looking at those. So impressions per click is just the inverse of click-through rate. So lowering your impressions per click is the same thing as increasing your click-through rate, right? Clicks per conversion, it's just the inverse of conversion rate. So again, lowering your clicks per conversion is the same thing as increasing your conversion rate. And if you really want to have a really deep understanding of these metrics, cost per click, it's actually the same thing as the CPM times the impressions per click divided by 1,000. So what that means is minimizing the product of the CPM and the impressions per click. It's the same thing as minimizing your cost per click. Make sense? So now that you have this convenient decomposition here, you can really evaluate each individual component. And if you detect one of these components being relatively high, you can drill down into it and see what's causing it. So let's say that in previous periods, you had a much higher click-through rate than 0.57. So this jumps off the page at you as being relatively high, meaning you think there's some room to reduce the impressions per click component of the decomposition. You want to raise the click-through rate and correspondingly decrease the impressions per click. Then what you can do is you can come down here and you can see the entire distribution of click-through rate across all of your keywords. So even better, you can drill into it to see the specific keywords that are pulling down your CTR. So your average CTR, if you remember, was about 0.56%. So maybe you want to see all the keywords that are lower than the average. So if you hop over here to this tab, which is where your data is being pulled in and cleaned up from the search term report, you can use this filter control here and set it to only show the data where the CTR is less than the average. Only show the keywords where the CTR is less than, let's do less than 0.005, which is just 0.5%. And when you filter this, the entire spreadsheet is going to update, the whole thing. So when we go back to the dashboard, bam, there you go. All your data is filtered now to show just that subset of the data. So now you're zoomed in to that portion of the distribution here on the left, and then on the right you can see all the keywords that fall in that segment. So the worst ones are at the bottom here. You can see fish and strip, those are the close to 0 click-through rate. So you may want to reduce your budget, your bid, or maybe add those as negative keywords depending on the situation. We're gonna drill more into those action items later. Then you can take it to the next level over here where you see the keyword bubble. So this is a great way to visualize your best versus your worst performing keywords. So we have click-through rate on the horizontal axis here, and we have conversion rate on the vertical axis. Then the size of the bubble is the ad spend. So the bigger the bubble, the more ad spend. So the top right corner is where you want your biggest bubbles to be. The bottom right corner is probably the least favorable spot to be. That's where you want your smallest bubbles, or better yet, no bubbles at all. That's where you're getting clicks, but no conversion. So it's wasted spend. It's like the 6,600 wasted spend we looked at towards the beginning. That's kind of why solving the click and conversion problem at the same time is important, right? You might think, oh, well, I'm getting clicks, so at least I have half the problem solved. Right? But unfortunately, that's the most expensive quadrant to be in. That would be like if you had a physical store and you invested money on print ads to get people in the store. You got people in the store, but then no one bought anything, maybe due to some kind of experience they had in the store itself. You know, if that happened, you'd probably be kicking yourself saying, man, I really wish I fixed the problem in the store before I started advertising to get people in the door, right? So when you hover over these little bubbles, you'll see the exact values. So for example, this one, parcel, it has a 0.5% click-through rate and 18% conversion rate, and you spent about $9.52 on the ad. So notice how the max value on the horizontal axis, it matches the currently selected filter that we chose, right? We said, show me everything less than 0.5%. So this chart auto-magically updated for the segment that we drilled into, which makes it super powerful for detecting problems that you want to investigate further. So remember, in this case, you're just looking at the keywords that are less than 0.57 because that's the filter we have selected. So by default, this bubble, this keyword bubble, it'll show you the top 100 keywords for the selected segment ordered by ad spend. So that makes it a little bit easier to see the individual bubbles. But you can always go over here, back to the dashboard, and then open up the panel. If you want to see more bubbles, you can always change that here, up here at the top. That'll bump it up so you can see more of the bubbles on the chart. See, we're looking at a lot more here now. Let's go put that back to 100. Okay, so how do you use this bubble chart to detect potential problems, right? After all, that's what we're trying to do here. Ultimately, the end goal here is to take some action and either increase ROI on our ads or eliminate ad spend on keywords that aren't working. So for starters, look at these guys kind of just sitting here on the horizontal axis. It's like they're sitting down, being lazy, right? They're just resting on the horizontal axis. These are all the keywords that haven't converted at all. The conversion rate is 0. Most likely the ones just camping out here on this line, they require some type of action from you. So what if it's sitting on this line? What if there's keywords sitting on this line, but they have a good number of clicks? So they're kind of further over to the right. Let's talk about that. But first, let's actually go back and reset that filter that we had. back to the default so we can see the entire range of click-through rate. So I'm just going to put this back to none and then hop back over to the bubble. There we go. So the ones sitting on this line that are getting a good number of clicks, again, those are going to be camping out closer to the right side of the line. Sellers usually call this class of keywords high click non-converters. So for example, this brown one right here, let's get that one selected. That brown one right there is the keyword accept. The content the customer is seeing in this ad, it seems to be compelling enough to drive them to click. So that gives you some valuable clues, right? So think about what's in the ad, the image, the title, what else is in there? The rating, the review count. So it seems like there's not really a problem there because they're clicking on it. But then for some reason, when the customer goes to look at the product page, they're just not buying. So the reason must have something to do with information that they're able to ascertain from the product page, but not from the ad itself. So maybe there's a specific review that turned them off, the actual detail of the review, the text. Or maybe your product description is not compelling enough. Or maybe the additional images threw them off. Or it could be something they're looking for that's missing entirely from the product, like a specific feature or benefit. So it could be a variety of things, but at least you've kind of narrowed it down a bit. And since by using this tool, you're spending almost zero time detecting the problem, now you can reinvest that time savings back into actually fixing it, which is what's really going to add value to your business at the end of the day, right? So within a matter of seconds, you can come into this keyword bubble and you can see exactly which keywords are converting. Not only that, but you can see how much you're spending on them, how many clicks they're getting. Guys, this is really powerful stuff here. I mean, you're taking your flat and completely devoid of insights, pay-per-click reports, those text files, and you're completely transforming them into this powerful keyword research tool so that you can harvest the fruits of your labor and also detect the problem areas that need your attention. So can you imagine, just imagine how difficult it would be to try and manually extract this information from the reports Amazon gives you. I mean, you'd be scrolling through this text file for days trying to wrap your head around what's going on in here. So while the keyword bubble is letting you drill down into specific segments and then visualize all the keywords in that segment across the 3 dimensions of click-through rate, conversion rate, and ad spend, the radar chart over here, this one lets you drill into a single keyword and it lets you see all 4 of the components that build up to your total cost per conversion. So seeing all the factors together like this, it really helps tell the story and the possible reasons for why you might be seeing poor performance for a specific keyword. So with this radar chart, the closer the blue lines are to the edge of the circle, the better. For example, this top one, impressions per dollar of ad spend, the closer it is to the top here, the more bang you're getting for your buck, holding the other factors constant, of course. But of course, a high number of impressions, it's only going to help you if you have healthy clicks and conversions too. So it's best not to think about these individual corners of this circle on their own, but rather think about the outline of all 4 points as kind of the fingerprint of the keyword. So for example, let's take a look at this keyword. Oh, we already have it loaded here. Stocking stuffers. Let's take a look at this one. The cost per conversion is way too high, $29, right? So unless it's a super high-end item, you probably have to get this down a lot in order to make a return on your investment. So this keyword, it's doing great on impressions for the segment of keywords that we're looking at. It actually has the highest impressions per dollar worth of ad spend. That's what the 100 means. It means it's of the 100 keywords, it's ranked in first place. So the average conversion rate for Amazon sellers, it's just under 10%. So it's not doing so great on the conversion rate because it's at 5.56%. And the CTR, the click-through rate, it's relatively poor as well. It's only at 0.15%. So let's think through why that might be. Well, it could be a few different reasons. Most likely, though, it's probably because your product isn't relevant enough for the keyword the customer searched for. So, for example, let's say that what you're selling is actually a stocking for Christmas, and you're running a phrase match on the keyword stocking, but you haven't yet created an exact keyword, a negative exact keyword for stocking stuffers. All right. So what's happening is when customers type in the search term stocking stuffers, your ad might start getting impressions, a lot of them towards the beginning of the campaign. But of course, as a customer, you already have stockings and you're just trying to stuff them. Then you're not going to click on the ad for stockings. So your click-through rate and your conversions are going to be low for that search term. And although you're seeing impressions now, most likely you'll eventually stop getting impressions for that keyword because Amazon will eventually deem your ad as not relevant for the search term. But you see how we used the outline of the radar chart as sort of a way to diagnose what's happening here. Now, the case when you have a high number of impressions but low click-through rate and low conversion rate, that's just one possible combination of these 4 factors, right? But if you'd like to dive deeper into more scenarios like this one, their possible causes, the suggested solutions, we'll do another video focused specifically on that. So when that video is available, you'll be able to find it by clicking on the button in the top right of the screen. And then depending on when you're watching this, of course, if you don't see it there, it means then we haven't posted it yet. So just stay tuned and we'll get it up there as soon as we can. Now, off to the right here, you're seeing some ideas of keywords that you might want to dissect further in the radar chart. You're looking at the top 10 most profitable keywords in the green table and the least profitable keywords in the red table. So the most profitable keywords table, you might want to take a look at that first one, spotless. So let's grab spotless on the radar chart. And you see, oh wow, your cost per conversion. You're thinking to yourself, oh, that's pretty good. $4.20. I mean, relative to the average of $9 is pretty good. And that's mainly because your click-through rate and your conversion rate are excellent relative to your other keywords. You see how those 2 points are really close to the edge of the circle? And then even on an absolute basis, if you look down here, your click-through rate is 1.4%. So that's pretty good by any standard. And then the conversion rate is incredible, almost 20%. So that's almost 2 times the average conversion rate for Amazon sellers. So you might be thinking, because it's in your top 10 most profitable keywords, that there's no room for improvement. But look what this radar chart is actually telling you. It's saying, hey, this keyword, it's actually in the bottom third of all your keywords in terms of total impressions per dollar worth of ad spend. Look at how close to the middle the impressions corner is, right? So that's worth investigating. Maybe what's happening is that this is an exact match keyword, and you might be able to change it to a broad or a phrase match keyword to start getting impressions from maybe some more commonly searched for variations on that sort of root keyword. Now, the same exercise applies to the 10 least profitable keywords down here in the red. You can dissect each one of these in the radar chart to diagnose your problem and then start hypothesizing about potential actions to take that you can take to go ahead and improve the situation. Now, naturally, the ones in this table are probably going to have more problems in the red table. They're probably going to have more problems or more work for you to do in terms of turning them around than the ones in the green table. Then over here, you can go to a whole nother level by actually seeing a specific list of recommended keywords to consider adding as negative keywords. Remember that $6,600 in wasted spend you identified on the dashboard? Those were the keywords that were generating a lot of ad spend, but no conversions. Well, you can kind of classify the culprits of wasted spend into these 3 categories of waste, if you will. You've got low CTR non-converters, you've got high spend non-converters, and you've got high click non-converters. So in this case, about 15 or so keywords fall into one of those 3 problem categories and match the current thresholds. So we'll go into the topic of negative keywords more in future videos, but for now, if it's a new concept for you, just know that a negative keyword, it's a way for you to block out certain keywords that you don't want to spend on. And then best of all, detecting these culprits here, the culprits of waste, they're completely customizable. So you can tweak the thresholds for all three of these rules up here in the inputs pane. So maybe we wanted to change the threshold for the high spend non-converters. We want to change the ad spend threshold to $25. Bam, there you go. Just like that, you see a couple of more keywords just popped into the fold there because they matched on the new criteria. These three categories here, these are classic candidates for negative keywords. Another use case is one that we actually mentioned a little bit ago, where remember we were saying you're selling a stocking, but people were searching for stocking stuffers. You could block out any spending on the keyword stocking stuffers by adding a negative exact keyword for that one. So this tool is not just a diagnosis tool. It's not just a keyword research tool. It's actually helping you create a treatment plan to optimize your Amazon pay-per-click. So if you're wanting to take your Amazon pay-per-click to the next level and automate all those cumbersome tasks that distract you from investing time in the high impact areas that actually grow your business, this spreadsheet's going to become your new best friend. Just think about a couple of the insights that we covered in this video, not even all of them. And just imagine, how would you even go about discovering those currently? It would probably take you days to do it manually, and the paid tools out there, they don't really give you anything near the same flexibility to explore and truly understand the dynamics of your pay-per-click campaigns. They're kind of a one-size-fits-all solution, but the thing is, each situation is different. So when you're really controlling your data in a spreadsheet like this and understanding it, you can create any type of custom analysis you can dream of. Of course, you can always ask us to do it for you to save even more time. So think about how much time this tool is going to save you and what you can do with that time. It could even mean spending more time with your family instead of letting your business run you. All right, now I want to hear from all you guys. I want to know, how are you visualizing your Amazon pay-per-click data currently? Are you just using the metrics they give you inside of Seller Central? Are you using your hard-earned profits, for a third-party tool that doesn't let you see exactly what you want? How are you finding your negative keywords currently? I want to know all about it, so leave it in the comments below along with any questions you have. I'll answer all the questions I possibly can. And if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and click on the circle icon right here to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.